You're live. Go ahead, Mr. Chair.
Untitled Chapter, welcome all. Before I begin with Cluckia, I just want to offer to member Robert Harding on behalf of the committee to express our condolences to him and all the Harding family for the death of his brother Brian, and also sympathies to Brian's widow and their children, and to wish them a speedy recovery, and also wish them well during the funeral service that is going to take place this Friday. Kei noi tātou, let us pray. Tātou tēnei mātou e pononga nei te inoi kia koe, kia tata mai koe kia mātou I tēnei ahi ai. I nā te tēnei kia koe, manaki hoki I tēnei kaupapa, tēnei huihuinga o tātou, rere ka tuku whakawheta I kia koe, mo manaki tanga ke mātou, mai I te timatanga taino ki tēnei haura. Mai ho ko te manaki mana koutou e tiaki, mai ho te maramatanga o na kanui ki runga kia koutou, mana anō, te koe ho te rangi marie, kia koutou ai anei, a ke tona atu. Amen.
Amen.
And so, yes, as I say, welcome all. We'll begin with 1.2 apologies. Are there any apologies? Okay, doesn't appear to be any apologies formally received. And so we'll go to 1.3, which is the confirmation of the agenda. Is everyone okay with the agenda as you have received them?
Yep.
Someone like to move that the agenda be confirmed?
Yeah, I move.
Seconded, Georgina. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
No, carried. So we move to 1.4, which is conflict of interest declaration. Are there any conflicts of interest from anyone?
Ahori.
If no conflicts of interest, we'll move to item 2, which is there are no presentations or petitions for this particular meeting. So we'll move to item 3, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the 17th of August. You've had a chance to read those minutes. Would someone move that those minutes be a true and correct record?
Aye.
William, seconded. Regina, I'll put that motion. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary no. That's carried. Are there any matters arising from those minutes? If not, we'll move to item 4, which is operations update.
Just a note here through you, Mr. Chair. This has been recorded through Facebook.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. And somebody's able to share on screen the various documentation as we go through.
Through the chair, I can do that. I can put up the agenda, just so I'll get the chair to call me when you want that, because otherwise you can't see each other at the same time. So I have the agenda in front of me and I can share screen, and I'll just get the chair to call that whenever you want to see something, if that's that'll help you with your meeting, I think.
You okay with that, William?
Oh yeah, probably not so much the agenda. It's more so the documentation of the reports that are coming from the various councillors and written in their report and reporting.
Sure. Okay. Operations update. Can we have a report on that, please?
Cool. That will be me. Kia ora, it's Darlene here. Tracy, are you able to mute I think it's Jax that's coming through? Cool, there we go. Okay, so just to give you guys a heads up, so Mike Collins has moved now to the Taharo domain. So he's our officer out there. Parks currently doesn't have any replacement officers. There is no Parks officers at the moment. So, and Mike happens to be on annual leave this week as well. But you'll see that it's a very short report anyway. Nothing much really to report on. So I'll take it as read. And if you have any questions, I will see what I can do to answer them.
Yep.
Peter?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Darlene, this is a new format, I think, which was explained in the paper that came with the new reporting format. And just to make sure that everyone's familiar with that, you might like to go through it. I think, if I understand it correctly, where you've got two columns of likelihood, impact, and severity.
Yep.
You've got the risk that's been identified on the left, and then you've got the mitigation plan.
Yes.
And once the mitigation plan's been enacted, then the likelihood, impact, and severity drop down. So in other words, the top line of 3, 5, 15 would reduce after mitigation to 2, 4, and 8. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
William, did you want that document displayed so that you understand what Peter's talking about?
Yeah, thank you. That's the very point I was sort of making, because I've had no time to actually get to the documentation.
Thank you, Tracy. Now, can you enlarge it so that we can?
Yep.
So what I was saying, Willie, is the risk has been described on the left-hand column.
Yeah.
And that risk has been assessed for likelihood of happening, what impact it would have, and how severe it would have in those three columns. And you've got a, I'm not sure, actually, Darlene might be able to mention in a minute, how far those indices will go up. Is that 15 out of 15 or 15 out of 20 or whatever? But then they put a mitigation plan along to the right in the right-hand column against that risk. And once that mitigation plan is enacted, then the likelihood, impact, and severity drop down to that 2, 4, and 8 on that top line.
Yeah,
So that's going to be obviously the reporting program or the reporting format from now on. And there seems to be getting consistency across all the parks that we have governance meetings on.
Sure. Yeah. Kia ora. Yeah. No, I get it. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Danny.
So, Darlene, did you want to comment on what are the numerical assessments there out of? Is it out of 20, 15, or what was? Do you know what that is?
I will see if I can. I can't quite remember what the framework is. I'll see if I can pull it up. No, sorry, I don't have that in front of me, but I can definitely send that out. There is a matrix.
Yeah, just as a matter of keeping everyone aware of what the impacts are, I think it's always a good idea to have along the bottom of a report just the a little note to say what those indices are out of. In other words, what's coded yellow, what's orange, what's red, and that can go on the bottom of the report each time it's put out, so we don't have any need to keep on asking the same question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's based on the Kaipara District Council risk rating table, and basically red is critical, amber is high, moderate is yellow, and green is low. But there's no, I can find the stats, the numbers that go with that.
Thank you.
Darlene, just a question from me, and looking at the fourth sort of line, drowning in pond. I take it that's the pond as you come in, driving up the hill on your left-hand side. And so by placing signage, because this pond is actually fenced, isn't it?
Yes.
And
well,
so,
paddock. Yeah.
Yeah. So by putting up signage, it actually drops the severity down to 5. How do we get it down to 4? Or less? Because it would be something similar to swimming pools, wouldn't it? Wouldn't the risk management be in line with a basic swimming pool?
I would have to. Yeah, I'll have to talk to our risk manager on that because he's the one that helps us to determine that.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Kia ora, through the chair. Are we sure that pond is fenced?
The paddock is fenced, isn't it? The paddock, so not the actual pond.
No.
The driveway
paddock.
is open.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yep.
And then there's a fence, beside it that you can go over into that pond area. Isn't it?
Mm.
Just trying to remember.
Because there's a walkway around it or something like that, if I can
Isn't
remember.
that up the side of the fence line? I'm just trying to visualize it in my head.
Aroha mai. I just know it's. I didn't believe it was fenced up the driveway.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I feel like it is.
That's a good question though, because then we've got, who's responsible if anything happened
Right,
there
the
if we're
liability.
unsure. Yeah,
So the
and if we're
liability is on
unsure if
council.
it's fenced.
So I would, so Mike did this. So Mike's very familiar with the park. So I would hope that he wouldn't have put it in if it wasn't there. So, but I will double check.
Thanks, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just one more, Mr. Chair. Just while you're doing that, Darlene, could I also suggest that by the time we have our next meeting and you have the risk assessment for the risk description or the risk areas, the point that I think it was Willie made was, what is the liability, or it might have been Georgina, what is the liability if there was a drowning then? Because unfortunately, we saw down the line, was it down in Otago, Dunedin City Council or Otago Regional Council, was a drowning down there, and there was
Yes.
quite a lot of issues that came from that child
Yes.
drowning. So we want to
Yeah.
be aware of what the liability, where would that be, or whose feet would that lay at, and and that will certainly determine what action we believe is necessary to mitigate against that ever happening.
Mm-hmm.
So, darling, you check that out for us, please.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, darling.
Any other queries? Okay, would someone move that we receive the operations update report?
I'll move
Yes,
that.
I'm happy to. Oh,
Peter,
I'm
seconded,
happy
Georgina.
to second. Yes.
We'll put the motion. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. It's carried. So we move to item 5. You can take that off the screen now. Thank you, Tracy. And we move to item 5, which is the reserve management plan suggestions. So, Mark, we're in your hands. Thank you, Mark.
Hi, team.
Hey, Mike.
Hi. So, yeah, so we've largely take the item as read. Particularly, you've received all of the submissions there and the written suggestions, and now we're required under the Act to give those full consideration. I don't think we need to go through them and discuss them, but what we'll do is through you, Mr. Chair, if you're happy with that, I'll sort of hand this largely over to yourselves to run this as a bit of a workshop. I want to go through and give us all of your suggestions, all of your direction for the park. And we sort of record, I think, more consensus than resolutions, but sort of record your direction. And then what we'll do as staff is we'll go away and draft the reserve management plan. And I'll also introduce to you Fiona from Stellar Projects. Fiona is the key consultant working on this project, and we'll be doing a lot of the drafting of the reserve management plan. So I don't know if you want to do the associated resolution, if you want to do that now, or if you want to do that at the end of the item, but we'll largely sort of run this as a workshop. Fiona and I, some of the other staff might, or we'll be here to answer any questions, and we might also help to guide some of the conversation. Just basically sort of, if you're happy with that, Mr. Chair, run this as a bit of a workshop and let you sort of discuss your ideas freely. And we're really interested to hear your direction for the park, and we'll then start to put that together into a draft reserve management plan.
Thank you, Mark. Yep. I guess we could put the resolution at this point and then follow on from what you're saying, Mark, about workshops. So would someone move then that we receive the reserve management plan suggestions? Karen, seconded.
I'll second that.
Peter, I'll put that motion. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. That's carried. Okay, Mark. So how do you want us to proceed, Mark?
Yeah, so I think if you can give us your direction for the park, and then if there's anything which anything which we feel has not been covered, we've got sort of a list of things to go through and make sure that we've covered everything. But happy just to hand it over to yourselves to give us your direction. You might want to think about. I can always share my screen if you like. I've got it's just Google Maps, but I find we can go through and look at the different areas of the park and look at the aerial if that helps.
Yeah.
And basically just sort of talk about the park and its future management, future development, and get some guidance. The report as well has a few things which came up from the suggestions that we'd like to get direction on, and of course the suggestions that we've received from the community are all there again to receive full consideration, and very interested to hear your views on that and which you'd like us to incorporate. Also, if you're happy to give direction now to Stella, to Fiona and myself, that we can refer, if you're happy for us to refer to those suggestions throughout the drafting process, to keep referring back to them, so we can also be guided by those.
I have a question, if that's okay, through the
Yes.
chair.
Yep.
I note that consultation has occurred, but it's been very light, and it's been light for a number of obvious reasons, which makes me uncomfortable in this space that we haven't heard from majority of our community. And I note even when we talk about Te Roroa engagement, there was a conversation with snow. Now that I don't know how others feel, but that for me appears that we haven't done enough to engage our community in this space. I'm interested to have that discussion.
Yeah.
So as staff, we can say that we've met all the requirements of the Reserves Act, and we did indeed go to Mana Whenua and ask for feedback. In terms of if it's enough, that's really, I suppose, a question for yourselves, and we can go further. We've got, I suppose, two options there. One is we can sort of delay the schedule and go out for further consultation, or alternatively we can continue with the development of the reserve management plan, but undertake targeted engagement. And as we've sort of specified, as we've said throughout this, there's no reason why we can't continue to work with key affected parties as we develop the draft.
Yeah, good question.
Georgina, yeah.
Oh, I'll let Peter go first.
Okay, Peter.
I think Karen's made a good point, but I'm also, when you say, Mark, council can still work with stakeholders. That's stakeholders that have been identified, and it's not the wider community. And of course, COVID's made that quite difficult to perhaps get the wider community involved. But I'm also very concerned that in the timetable that's presented, you actually bring the final reserve management plan for adoption to the very last council meeting of this term. Now, I think it's absolutely essential that this reserve management plan gets signed off and adopted by council in this term. Otherwise, there'll be a new governance committee for this park, and you'll end up having to possibly re-educate the council and iwi representatives on that new governance committee, and they won't have had any of the history of leading up to the development of this new reserve management plan. So we're in a bit of a cleft stick here. While there may have been lesser consultation than normal, unless we can bring about additional involvement of the community and not in any way delay the presentation for adoption to the September 2022 council meeting, then I'm sort of a bit unsure of how we can proceed, to be fair. What are your comments there, Mark?
Yeah, I think if we try to speed the process anymore, yeah, we will run into difficulties. I think in terms of doing a quality job. Yeah, in terms of for the public engagement, we do of course have a 2-month consultation period coming up once we get to having a draft. So what we've done here is we've done the reserves that requires us to do the first round of consultation where we're saying to everybody, give us your suggestions. And we did put the word out there through Lifestyle and various channels, and we did get it. In my experience, working with council, we got a good response. We had a number of people submitted, and we had a few even face-to-face meetings. Yeah, unfortunately, COVID got in the way. We had to have an online meeting as well, but we were able to get some good suggestions coming from the community. And so those suggestions, now come to yourselves for consideration, and then through you can come into the draft plan. And then there's a 2 months statutory requirement. A statutory requirement under the Reserves Act to consult for 2 months on the draft, and that's when people actually can have a draft to actually look through and pull apart and tell us what needs to change, and also tell us what's good and needs to stay in there. So yeah, there's certainly opportunity for full public consultation. And the opportunity for hearings. That's all coming up still. What we also have an opportunity for as we're drafting is to work with some of the particularly some of those key parties who are invested in the park, such as the museum and the heritage machinery and so on, and of course mana whenua we can work with throughout the drafting process as well.
Yeah. I guess in many respects, Mark, I'm not sure from history's point of view, but a lot of people in the community often find it easier to make comment when they've got a draft in front of them rather than a blank sheet of paper coming up with ideas. So you might be right that the 2-month consultation of a draft reserve management plan is where we'll get more interest from the community and better feedback.
Any other comments?
Probably, I just want to follow up in line with Karen's point regarding, say, Te Roroa. To what extent, perhaps, and this is probably through you, Georgie, as a trustee, to what extent was Uria Hau been engaged?
I'm unaware of the meeting being held online, and I'm not quite sure why that is, or who actually set that up, and was it to the office? So I'm not sure, Mark, on that, on point F on our paperwork. And so that was going to be my question, was around who did you engage with in terms of that? Was it the office? Was it the marae? Or was it myself and Willie that received an email? Because I was unaware that had happened. And perhaps in the future, perhaps that's something that we could advertise through our Uria Hau Facebook page or our website in terms of sharing that aspirational kind of things that we see. But I agree with Peter. I think if people are given a blank sheet of paper, they don't always understand what it is that we're trying to achieve. So perhaps just some very brief bullet points around what it is that the aspirations of this committee, where they can have a baseline to feed into, might be helpful. And we could probably have a discussion later around how we can engage a lot more effectively in terms of bullet point F.
Yep. So yeah. So through so with with engaging with mana whenua, what we do is we contact mana whenua. In this case, it was through the Te Reo Home office, and we ask them what is the most effective way to engage. And the suggestion with them was to have this meeting online, regrettably due to the COVID situation. Yes, and we actually gave it to them to distribute the invitation. So I put together the invitation together, and we had sort of a limited number of people who we included, and then we put it to Te Reo Hou to extend that further. And we also contacted Te Parawhau, Te Kuihi, and Te Roro as well, to ask them for comment.
Thanks, Mark.
Any other comments?
Well, I guess, Mr. Chair, the question for us as a committee is, are we happy with the time frame that Mark is proposing, which will give the major feedback opportunity for all parties, whether it be stakeholders or the community, to be the 2-month consultation of a draft reserve management plan once it's been prepared. If we're happy with that, well, then we can go forward. If we think there needs to be more consultation, well, that'll obviously blow out the time frame and does put us at risk of having to move into the next council term, which does possibly complicate matters a wee bit.
Yeah. Look, honestly, Mark, thank you. I think council is doing the best you can under these conditions, and I think that as a committee we need to be reflective of the environment that we're in, and I'm suggesting, Mr. Chair, we keep moving forward and allow that 2-month consult, that more of an open thing. But I think we keep moving forward, because I agree with Peter that this management plan, amendments, whatever, it goes through in this calendar year, so to speak, before council or even Udi go into new elections.
Yeah, I support that one.
Karen?
Oh, kia ora. I'm mindful we need to get this right. So a reserve management plan shouldn't be restricted by a council term. That being said, I'd love to still be here when it goes for decision. But I'm interested in what the comms strategy or comms plan is around that 2 months of consultation, because we've just seen how difficult that can be right now in this certain climate. So how are you going to engage our community over those 2 months when people are too scared to come out of their houses, have to socially distance? What does the comm strategy look like around that, so you can assure me or reassure us that you've got this in hand when February rolls around next year, to go out and do the best engagement we can possibly do. And that includes, engaging at the marae level. What does that stuff look like? Because that's what I don't understand right now. It's all good to give me 2 months, but what does that 2 months concentrated effort look like? How are you going to pull it off?
So we currently have not got a comms plan drafted for that consultation. That's a step we still need to undertake, and we can work with you on that. But normally what we do is fair standard for us is to advertise as wide as we can. So newspaper, such as the Kaipara Lifestyler, but also on our Facebook page, on our website. We put together a list of key parties who we email directly or contact directly. With mana whenua, what we do is we ask them as we ask them what the best way to engage with them is. And if they give us the feedback that we need to go around the marae or a certain marae, then we can undertake that. So the comms plan is as yet not developed, but we sort of have a standard approach which we can alter it to meet whatever requirements, and we're happy to work with you on that or bring that back to yourselves for approval before we go out. Obviously, you have to approve the draft as well before that goes out. So there's a process to go through. The first step in the process under the Reserves Act, and it's a bit unusual. Most of the documents the council prepares, you simply prepare the document and then go out to the community with it and ask them for feedback. And as you say, you tend to get a bit more feedback when you've got a draft that people can look through and can understand, and it can start to unpack. The Reserves Act does actually require us. Well, it doesn't fully require us. It says we can choose not to undertake this first step. We've chosen to undertake this first step, which is to go out and ask the community for suggestions. The council's even started doing that to some extent with some other documents we prepared, just because it's good to get the suggestions up front. So yeah, so the strategy is not written as yet, but we can prepare that and bring that back to you ahead of that 2-month consultation.
You happy with that, Karen?
Oh, I don't know if I'm happy with it, but it's a good reply. Yeah, it's fair enough. I mean, it's one of those things. I know when you look at Taharo, where we're constantly referring to a reserve management plan, because that's how we're guided. You know, that's where we know what these things are going to cost us, what it's going to cost our ratepayers. So it's just such a critical piece of the puzzle in getting the reserve management plan right. I know that we've got consultants in the mix, you know, that have come on board to help us with these things. So it seems like the process is underway. Things are happening as they need to. I just know there's risk around not getting all the voices at the table.
Sure.
Through the chair, I'd like to add that also sometimes it's hard to get them to the table, and it does make it a bit tricky. And I know Mark goes above and beyond to try to make that happen. But yeah, we'll definitely work on that comm strategy. I would like to ask too, like with regards to all the suggestions that have been put in, is there anything, you know, screamingly in there that you wouldn't want seen, or? Because I mean, there's lots of good ideas, but yeah, what are your thoughts on the community's feedback?
Yeah, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I guess just as a general comment, I felt that many of the submissions that were made from just about all parties had an incredible amount of operational aspects to it, just general maintenance concerns, etc. And I think that's something that council staff should take notice of and include in their plans for just general overall maintenance for the park. And it's not something that we really should be addressing for the reserve management plan. But it was interesting to note that these people who took the time to submit actually highlighted so much operational stuff. And so that's just one comment. There's two other things that I think are quite pertinent here. We had several submitters who were suggesting a reconvening of what was the old Harding Park advisory group. Now, and Georgina will be familiar with this. She's been on the Mangawhai Community Park. There's a parallel to that. Now, that park has got a Friends of Mangawhai Community Park, and that group is made up of a representative from every stakeholder who's got a license to occupy or inhabits a part of the park. So you've got the museum, the historic village, the MAZ, the Mangawhai Activity Zone, the golf club, the Mangawhai Club, the trackies. They're all represented on that Friends, and they anything they want to do on their patch, they socialise it with that group. And if everyone is happy, or if there are any issues to be sorted out, they're all sorted out until everyone is happy, and then it is forwarded on to the governance committee, which of course is made up a bit like this governance committee. And that is a very good filter for, you don't get any way out stupid ideas coming up from one group, because by the time it's been socialized, everyone has had a chance to review it and say, yes, it's good, or it's got to be amended because otherwise it's going to impact on us, and all that sort of thing. So I think that's not a bad sort of amendment to the way in which the park is governed. It also gives each individual stakeholder more responsibility for doing what they're meant to do on their patch under their terms of their license to occupy or whatever lease, etc. they've got. So, I think that is, from my perspective, I really tended to share I think there were 2 or 3 submitters who made that recommendation to reconvene that group. And, I think that's a good idea. I don't know how other committee members feel, but I certainly would support that.
Through the chair, Peter, that one is run by the community, eh? They set that all up themselves.
That what they do, I'll just mention it, the chair of that Friends of Mangawhai Community Park is one of the stakeholders that they appoint, and they have their own minute secretary, etc. The chair of the Mangawhai Community Park is usually one of the community representatives on the Mangawhai Community Park Governance Committee. And also up until about 3 years ago, it was run completely independently of any of council elected members. But then, and I was on the committee at the time, when we decided that to improve the link and improve the communication between the Friends group and the governance group, that we would alternate. One member of the governance group would tend to go to each of the monthly Friends meetings, but tended to be on a rotating basis. Like I might go 1 month, get Anna Kerno the next month, then one of the other members the next month, so that we shared the load, but it gave us a better, if you like, communications link in with the Friends group. So that would be very easy. The model's already there. It works well. It could easily be set up here, and you'd have each of the stakeholders represented there, and it would probably improve the communication on issues like the maintenance things that we've seen coming out on these submissions, as well as good ideas that we would have then to feed into a reserve management plan or any other annual plan we might have for the park.
Just on that, Peter, is that funded, or is that sort of in kind, sort of from the community? That second tier, the stakeholders engagement.
Oh, the stakeholders. Well, they're just representing the group. That's all basically done.
Yeah.
We've got a fairly high level of volunteer effort going on over here, and they just turn up. They have it goes for about an hour and a half or so once a month. And yeah, I've just got, in fact, today I just got a set of minutes from the last the meeting that was held on the 15th of November, and each of the stakeholders have got a little paragraph in there about what they're doing and what it was agreed if they've put anything to the Friends, and also at the end of it, anything that they want to then take up to the governance committee at that level. So yeah, it's formalised, but yeah.
Mm. And just to support what Peter's saying as well, is it's absolutely a go-to place for young people, for all ages. It's such a well utilised park.
Mm.
It's amazing.
So, I guess that certainly is something that came through in several of the submissions, and I'd certainly support it. So if others of the committee do, well, then staff and the consultants can take that on board.
Yeah, and that could come through the suggestion, that something like that could easily be set up, as you're saying, Peter.
Oh, yes. The model's already there. It'd be very easy to set that up, yes.
Okay, so any other comments?
I guess the other one, Mr. Chair, is and this came through, I think, in the very first submission, about providing a visitor hub. Now, I think, again, there's been a lot of comment from the community over the last year or two when the eyesight that was run tended to shut up shop. And I guess there's possibly still a undercurrent within the Dagwood community in particular that would like to see some form of that re-established, and whether or not a visitor hub to attract visitors to the museum and all the bike trails and everything else is something that could be considered. My feeling is that if anything like that was available to be put together, again, it could be run by volunteers. You know, they claim here initially by ambassadors, but I know that we have one over here right beside the golf club and Mangawhai Club and Eye Centre, and that's 100% volunteer manned and provides a very good entry point into the East Coast for visitors. And you often see 3 or 4 camper vans parked in a little car park there, getting up their brochures and information about the area before they travel on their holidays. So, you know, whether something like that can be set up, then that might be worth consideration as well.
Through the chair, Mark, with some of these projects, obviously some of them are quite aspirational and they're going to take a bit of money. How do you capture that in the reserve management plan?
So with the reserve management plan, we want to get a vision for where we want this park to go, and looking to yourselves to sort of to provide that vision. And with aspects of that which may be aspirational, some of these projects which may be very expensive, what we can do is we can note them that they're supported by the plan, or they're even a part of the plan, that this is sort of project which we envisage one day taking place. And note that these are aspirational projects which we may not achieve, or we may not achieve for some years, and we may require external funding to achieve those. But if we can put them in the plan, then you know, if we do get a group who's willing to undertake that, or someone who's willing to fund that, then you know, we can one say yes, it's in accordance with the plan. It can get the green light. The other thing which we can do is apply for funds, and you know, a lot of the funding application criteria does tend to ask, is this in accordance with a local government plan? And you can say, yes, it is. Here's the reserve management plan, and it clearly says here that this project is in accordance with the reserve management plan. This is something we would like to see happen, and that makes it a lot more appealing to get funding.
Mr. Chair, I'd also like, just I know I'm sort of taking up a lot of speaking time, but I sort of warmed to the suggestion that Brent Fernandez raised, where he volunteered to set up a Friends of Wellesley Cemetery group to look after the cemetery and keep it in pristine condition. And he gave some photographic evidence of what other centres have done with their cemeteries, and they all certainly look pretty vibrant, because these community groups, if you have a passionate group of people who set something like that up, it does tend to drag a lot more of the community into the park. And the more people you get into the park on whatever reason, it tends to add life, and it's a sort of a fertile place to get people to create ideas, get interested in improving the park and all the rest of it. So I sort of feel that we should be supportive of any individual who has some time on their hands and some passion about setting something like that up, and giving them some boundaries and say, well, here, if you go within these, go away and do it, and let us know. If it doesn't happen the way you want it to happen, well, okay, we may not be able to proceed. But if it does, well, it adds something to the park and sets us up to have a more vibrant park in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. Yeah, that there are people there with passion, you know, for certain things in the community, and they're putting their hand up to be able to assist and support. I mean, the same thing happened when the Riverside Gardens Tahawa was set up. There were friends of the gardens got together and started coming up with ideas for plants and, you know, different things like that. And so that was a big support, for the committee. And I think, similar thing happening, and you see it coming through some of the suggestions that have been made here. It can only benefit, the whole Harding Park Rangi situation.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and to the members present here, if you were to walk into the old Mount Wesley Cemetery in 10 years' time, after such a group had perhaps been established and allowed to do some work there, what would you like to see? What would you like it to look like? What would you like to see as you walk in 10 years' time?
I'd like to see it a well cared for cemetery, which is nicely presented. It's been maintained, because the group is not just a group, or not the way I would envisage Friends of the Cemetery being set up. It would be a group which would volunteer, a few hours a week or month to go and do work there to keep it tidy up and to paint the fences or paint gravestones if they needed painting or whatever, to keep the actual cemetery looking in good condition. You can always see, you can wander around the country and you can see some beautiful cemeteries that are very, very well maintained, and at the other end of the scale you get cemeteries that are totally overgrown and don't look as though anyone would ever want to go in there to do anything. So what I'd like to see is one at the right end of the scale, one that looks cared for. I like going to cemeteries because they provide an amazing amount of history about the local community, and you can read an awful lot into what happened in the community by going to a cemetery. It was only a few weeks or a month or two ago, I was up in Russell and wandering around the little Russell cemetery, and it gave you a very good feel of what was happening around back in the 1830s to 1850s, just seeing who was in the actual cemetery and how well that was presented. So I think we've got a lot to learn from some of the cemeteries that other communities throughout the country have currently in their midst.
Thank you for that. Anything further? So
Mr. Chair, is there anything you would not want to see in the cemetery? Oh, yeah.
Well, I wouldn't want to see a cafe for a start. I think, Mark, the answer to that question is that if a Friends of the Cemetery was in fact set up, then there would have to be some ground rules or conditions established just to give the parameters in which they would work, and that can all be set up in that.
All right.
Yeah, because the reserve management plan sort of creates a vision of where we're heading. So, so if we wanted to see, for example, like shade trees, there was also the suggestion there for interpretive signage, things like that. So you'd put those sort of projects into the reserve management plan. And in the same way, we'd also maybe put some note if there was some kind of something we don't want to see, like for example, if we didn't want shade trees, for example, we wanted to remain predominantly open, or if we wanted, not to see large structures or large monuments created, crypts, etc. Things like that. So there is, so I'm sort of looking for a bit of direction on what we might like to see the cemetery looking like in 10 years' time. So we can put these things in the reserve management plan, and then whether if it's council doing the work or whether if we get together a community group, ultimately they need to be guided by this sort of agreed vision.
Exactly. It may well be that if you've got a community group that's under the auspices of sort of Friends of the Cemetery, then council might fund the plants for them to plant, etc. But they would then do all the labour and looking after them, etc. This is quite common right throughout the district. We made a grant to a community group through one of the grants that I was chairing a few months ago. It was only about $1,000, but it created a whole lot of plants, and they went off and did the planting and looking after it. So there's different ways of funding. I'm not suggesting there'll be a huge funding drain on council reserves at all, but I think that from a reserve management point of view, it's really a matter of putting in something which encourages properly formed and managed community groups to participating in developing the park for the benefit of the whole community.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I wonder if we move on to the pass site, what would we like to see that looking like in 10 years' time? There's been some suggestions put forward there, but what would you like to see the pass site look like in 10 years?
Yeah, there has been some discussion, William, about the vision for the pass site. We've had a couple of discussions already. Haven't really, formulated anything that we wanted to have there, but a whole lot of ideas came out. So yeah, I don't know if you want to comment what the meeting we had, William.
Yeah, I suppose specific to answer your question, Mark, in relation to the PAR, is to actually have it develop the way that mana whenua and how they want to reflect their aspirations for the long-term vision, the history, the connectiveness, and the sensitivity of that site. And that's the vision. Of course, like anything, there's a roadmap that has to guide us down that track and to achieve that. I think the meeting that we did actually have with those members, I think there was about 12, 14 mana whenua individuals at that meeting. I suppose the biggest, what's the word, corridor around it is they were feeling, mana whenua feeling that Poutuotarangi is in itself isolated from its people and its history. And so in saying that, they wanted to utilize that point and its history to actually then reverberate it back out to the people, back out to the other maraes around the kaipara and stuff like that. And that was also through Te Roroa, Te Parawhau, Uriahau and others. And so that whanaunga tanga, that is what the PAR site is about, and its connectedness through that tupuna. I suppose what I'm trying to say is to develop the PAR site and not in isolation of developing our people, our community, and connecting all those maraes that belong to that PAR site within that whole. Do you understand what I'm sort of suggesting or saying? Yeah. So the reserve management plan fits just with the whenua itself within the reserve and things like that. But the story, the connectiveness of Poutuotarangi has a wider spread of history, of people and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I mean, so Homo Warangi is also connected to Oraki and to South Kaipara. So that PAR site is not only reflective of its geographical location, it is a connectiveness of the tupuna himself. Anyway.
Through the chair, can I just add on to that? Because I actually did a little summary with my whānau, the younger generation, on what they would like to see in terms of Poutuotarangi. And it's everything that Willie has also said around preserving our history, but also showcasing our history and who we are as people, and how can we do that and engage our younger people to be a part of that. And you know, and we've talked about it in our forums where actually the past site is not as well known as it should be, and that we should be showcasing the actual historical people that we are. So some of the things that came out was around the museum showcasing an electronic video that just plays continuously, showcasing the past site, which then would generate some interest inside for those to go and walk outside and actually physically stand in the presence of that past site and take in those beautiful views. Also an update of the actual board that they've got there. It's so old and very hard to read that that should be a priority around the advertising there. And without me going on too long, it was around showcasing and thriving our cultural experiences through the past site, which is an absolute tonga sitting right there in our backyard that is extremely underutilized. And so, you know, I think by bringing together not just Uriaho, South Kaipara, Orake, and having their viewpoints as well around how we can actually make this an actual thriving cultural centre, and also putting on display our taonga that we have through some of our walks that are sitting in our Uriaho office, showcasing our taonga there as well, and just being, you know, uplifting who we are as people. So that's coming from the eyes of young people, what they see that would be a draw card for them to be able to feel proud and know that they've participated and are a part of that past site. It is absolutely a truly magnificent place to stand on. I know every time I'm in Dagwood, I feel very proud to go and walk there and stand on there and just take in all those beautiful views. So it's about showcasing our backyard a lot stronger than what we currently have, updating some of those billboards, having a video playing all the time in the museum, which you know, would alert people to go outside, and in time, I guess, having the Palisades there, running cultural experiences there, sharing our history, having a kapahaka, taking kapahaka groups up there, performing those, making it a real live, living place to be. Kia ora.
Yeah. I think that's a great vision, Georgina, and it's certainly in line with what I think we've loosely talked about in a couple of meetings we've had earlier this year. It really needs, again, a good foundation to develop a plan of attack, if you like, to start putting it step by step into place, and how that's incorporated in the reserve management plan, because really I think it's got to be driven by all the iwi that you suggested have got historic links to the past site. And again, once you've got a foundation of a plan together, you've got an opportunity to go and get some external funding, because obviously it's going to take probably all the things we talk about for the park. This has got the potential to take the most funds to do it properly, because I think it's not going to be something we would want to do half-heartedly. It's got to be done well and done the right way, so that everyone can see the history and what it actually brings to the community at large.
So through the chair, I think so Mark would need some direction around this. And I know that I've been at council for 8 years, and I think this is something that's been talked about for quite some time. So if we can get something, if we can provide some sort of guidance to Mark to what we can put into this plan, then that might help to give it some traction as well. Yeah.
The key thing, darling, is I think that whatever's put in the plan, it shouldn't be put in as a council project. That's my comment. This is not something that the council will be leading. It's something that the iwi should lead, and that gives a whole different dimension of funding availability, etc., etc. And that's the key to it, I think, because at the end of the day, we could all have some fantastic, bright ideas, but ultimately, it's all going to take money to put into place. And the better we do it, probably the more funds it's going to take. Now, I think the funding is there if we approach it the right way, but we've just got to get it set up in the right framework. So, Mark, however that's embodied in any reserve management plan, it's got to make that delineation between where it sits in the overall plan.
But does that mean having to go back to Hapu and Iwi for those conversations like Karen, you were talking about, an extension of just not one or two, but, more conversation. And I gather what you're talking about, Georgina, is involving the young people because they come up with some, fantastic ideas.
So through the chair, Mark, do you have enough to be able to capture something that we could put into the plan?
Yeah, so there was some good. Yeah, that was some good feedback we got, and obviously as we go and move on to drafting, we will be looking to engage specifically with Mana Whenua and with Te Reo Hau, particularly with respect to the site, and to sort of nut out the details as we draft. What I would be interested to hear from the group here today is, are there any examples? You think about how this power site could look or feel in 5-10 years' time. Are there any examples of other places you've been, other power sites you've been to that you'd like to see as maybe a bit of a blueprint, or there was a particular aspect you'd like to see repeated here, or anything that you thought was actually maybe done particularly poorly? I know myself, I've been around a few different museums and things, and I can sort of think to myself of some of the better ones, and some of the mistakes made perhaps as well. So any feedback like that would be really valuable to us, because we can then look at those examples and how we could incorporate some aspects of that perhaps.
Okay.
Kia ora, through the chair. I totally support what you were saying there, Georgina, around those cultural aspects for the pā. I'm interested to know, because we've discussed the site. Well, I've been discussing the site for nearly 5 years, but one of the conversations that took place was about redirecting the traffic out onto Golf Course Road, or so making that a loop, taking that current loop out and looking at ways to send the traffic out onto that back road, and then extending the pā as far as we possibly could, and that old road becoming a walking track to keep, vehicles off the pā. Because, it has to be said that that pā site is not just that bit down the end. It was originally the entire site. So when I look at a pā and I look at that place, I just see confusion. It's really hard to tell the story of what that place is and why it remains so special for so many, because you've got all sorts of bits and pieces going on up there, and the reserve management plan needs to tidy that up. So you've got those largely cultural. For me, when I look at that site, I go back to a cultural space, yet it doesn't reflect that. I see economic, I see social, I see, commercial, I see all these things that have no place at a pā. And this is just my whakaaro, but they have no place at a pā. So we need to find a way to, if we're going to showcase that site and talk about how important and how special it is, the pā has to be a major focus. And I would strongly encourage us to look back at the minutes from our previous meetings that Jim was looking at, taking that road up the existing and then turning it left and hooking onto the Golf Course Road, so that we could then just have, less impact, less vehicle impact, less issues with traffic, because it's not an enjoyable space at the moment when you're there and you're dodging traffic. So there's a number of things that we've discussed previously that I'm not sort of hearing or seeing mentioned, and it's a little bit disheartening that we've been talking about it for 5 years, but it's not featuring in this discussion today, or necessarily in any of the paperwork that I've seen. So how do we get that sort of thing if we're talking about environmental protection of that site? If you go up there now and you look towards town, you look towards the river, you can't even see anything because those wattle trees, those weeds, are higher than buildings. So the view's obscured now, and that takes away from so much. You used to be able to stand there and take pretty pictures down by those masts, which I'm not in favour of actually, but anyway, that's my take. You can't get photos down there now looking towards town because the weeds are in the way. So for me, how do we look after that environmental footprint that's going on up there, that's getting really messy and disturbed, that urupa that sits there, that is, that's so tapu. How do we have a tapu and a no and keep everyone safe that visits that site? So there's a few things that are going on for me, and I just I'm interested to see how this lands in the paper for the community to share feedback on and consult on. Kia ora.
Kia ora. So just to clarify, Karen, with the
through you.
Sorry. So are you talking around? So you wouldn't have the road come right round past where the Rainbow Warrior things are and the par site and everything? It would come up past the pond and out Golf Course Road. Is that?
Yeah, somewhere near that new bike track. So there's a paper road there. Jim looked at the paper road. The paper road hooks onto Golf Course Road. Yeah. And then we talked about sort of how that might become a reality. Yes, there was costs involved, and they were fairly significant because that's a metal road. So there was, concerns that we would have to tar seal that road. Mm-hmm. But there might have been some sort of trade-off with the residents living along there, that they wouldn't be opposed to increased traffic because they now have a tar seal road versus a metal. So that was one of the things that we'd looked at, as well as somehow putting a bus bay up there. So, enhancing or making improvements with the existing car park. Then where the car park is that actually connects to the museum, that piece of tar seal that leads up to that entranceway, that then is foot traffic only. That is one of the things we discussed. So where the toilets are, where that car park bay is, there'd be some sort of turning ability in there, be that what it is, I don't know, I'm not a traffic engineer, but and then from that point on everything was walking, and we talked about regrassing, making it safe for kids to go and play and spend time with their family where they didn't have to dodge traffic.
Well, thank you.
Through the chair, would it be beneficial if I share my screen and we can have a look at the site, at the aerial photo?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so got the aerial photo here. So you can see there the sites. We've got the cemetery, which we've talked about. The reserve management. The power sites. This is as we said. This if I zoom out, right out, you can see that once upon a time all this flat land would have been one big Kayakatea swamp forest, and you've got this area here which is raised and would have been attracted to settlement. It's got good views along the river, and so you know with the power site being built there. The piece which we have today is only really sort of I think was one of the most fortified parts, but it was sort of a remnant of the power site. The site itself and habitation would probably have covered much more of this raised area. And so there's come to the site today. There's been quite a bit of earthworks through here as part of putting the museum in and whatnot. Yes, as was said, the power site's not limited just to this area here. The whole site has significance. You can see the existing roadway there, and not quite sure what the or how far the investigations got as to redirecting travel, but yes, Old Golf Course Road is just there, so there would be the potential possibly to redirect and have a loop coming onto Old Golf Course Road, and as you say, make this into just a pedestrian area, and we can look at turning requirements and so on. If that is something that this group would like, and I urge you to consider options, consider ideas, and let us know what your vision is for this park, and we can go away as staff and we can look at things like turning requirements for buses, for vehicles, etc. And can come back with and also the costs and whatnot, and can come back with suggestions and with advice to guide you on some of those decisions. But we will
Through the chair,
Yes.
Mark, there is a report with plans and designs. There was 3 options given to us,
Yep.
and like most councils, we take the cheapest. But there is that work has already been done. I don't know whether Hamish might have access to it or someone's got access to it because it came to a meeting.
Yeah.
2 or 3 meetings ago.
in that case, it will be on the public record and be on our records.
So,
good.
Mark, just out of curiosity, so Old Coach Road is the boundary to the reserve. So where the existing road that climbs the hill, and to Old Coach Road, that is still part.
Yep. So Old Golf.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
The reserve runs down to Old Golf Course Road here.
Right. Yeah.
And it excludes these houses over here. Comes around over to here and back over to here. Yep.
So Karen, that
Also,
in part of the plan was
sorry,
that
go ahead.
to have the exit and entrance through Old Golf Course Road, have both the exit and entrance.
No, that's not to say it couldn't happen. It was actually to come in on Mount Wesley Coast Road and go out on Old Golf Course Road, or vice versa, whichever was the better. But at the time, we were presented with entry on Mount Wesley and exit on Golf Course. And like I say, that Old Golf Course Road is not sealed. That was a significant cost to bear at the time, and we were looking at funding when we put in that provincial growth fund application that Darlene drafted up on behalf of us. These were the conversations that were taking place at the time.
Yeah, through the chair. Fiona, do you know, did Stella do those reports?
Kia ora, Diana. I was just trying to find it. Actually, there was a report done by Stella traffic engineers, but I am not sure the scope of what or the intent of what it looked at, and if it looked at just the safety implications of the road rather than doing it from like an amenity parks point of view. So I know there was one done last year, so that might have been the one that's talked about, but I can definitely dig that up.
Yep.
But that's not to say that, you know, if it was just done for a safety reason, we can also relook at it and see the feasibility of going out Old Coach Road to see if it is feasible, if that hadn't been considered in that report. So can look into that.
Mr. Chair, just for everyone's information, The report, I've just dragged it up. The report we're talking about is the Stella report. It's the Potootu Rangi Safety and Connectivity Assessment, and it was presented to our meeting of what date was that? That was the 19th of May last year. We had that meeting that presented to us with all the traffic options that they had in that report. That'll be a good starting base for any further discussions, I suggest.
Okay. Yep.
So Mark, you're all good with that? Adding that.
Yeah, we can look back on the reports. What I really would like from the group today is a sort of direction on what your preference is. Because if you want to tell me right now that the status quo with the current setup of the driveways is working well and is your preference, then we won't look any further because we take the direction from yourselves. If you would like us to go and look at those reports and so come back to you with some recommended options, have another workshop and discussion with you around that, then that would then we can do that. And if you actually have a preference and you want to give us some direction, that we can look at starting. We won't be just going straight back to you with a draft reserve management plan to go out for consultation with this. We're going to have to come back to you a few times, and we're going to have to talk about some of these things. But so I suppose if there's is there any consensus or any preference on orientation for driveways and access? Also, just draw your attention to Park Road here. There's current pedestrian access through here, so if you've got any views on how that could be enhanced or if you want it closed off or just direction on that, we're very interested in as well. How Harding Park can link right down, because it's grassed area as well, linking right down to Park Road. So, yeah, all of that just direction is what we're looking for.
Yeah, I think Mark, it'd be fair to say that the group here would want you to explore those suggestions that came up last year, as Peter had indicated on the date of last year, that there's already been, we've already had discussions about it, and I think that's what we want to pull up. And in terms of what are the options, I think we look at the options that were provided at that time, and I think we can then have a look at what we might like to have implemented going forward.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think I'd agree with what you're saying, that in fact, Mark, if you go back to that report was prepared for a slightly different reason. We're looking here at a much longer time frame in a reserve management plan, and this is sort of part of the aspirational view of where we want to progress the park in which direction. So we probably need to look at those recommended options that came to us in May of last year and say, well, would some of these other options, which we may not have agreed to go with at that stage, better fit what our aspirations are over the next 10-year time frame? And so it probably needs a re-looking at it and coming up with some of the options, and then we can discuss them in another workshop. But just for the committee now, I think I would be interested to see whether what the committee's views or support is for another topic, which will be a bit controversial for some, but it was raised in one of the submissions by one of the gentlemen, and this is about the potential for relocating the Greenpeace or the Rainbow Warrior masts down, as we talked about it in one of our meetings some time ago, down to the foreshore of Dagwood, down by the river frontage somewhere, and make it more accessible and a better tourist and visitor venue, rather than having them, what is, as Karen's already mentioned out, is if we're going to develop and have aspirations to develop that pass site into a much bigger and much more beneficial type of site, then those masts are going to increasingly become in the way, and we're going to have to work around them. So do we take the plunge and put in the reserve management plan that our vision is to relocate those and to not just chuck them in a corner, but actually make a feature of them down on the Dagwood river frontage down there, so they could actually get more profile than they do currently at the park. So it's a bit of a, swings and roundabouts. Some people may like them up at the hill, but they're not getting much attention up there. Down by the river frontage, they could get a lot more attention and be far better attraction for the community down at the township. So do we want to put that in the reserve management plan and get consultation feedback on?
Yeah, I agree with you, Peter, there, because those masts contradicts the actual purpose of the whenua itself.
Yes.
It's actually quite it contradicts the sensitivity. I mean, blowing up of the Rainbow Warrior, and now we've got them sitting on Mana Whenua's par site. It just contradicts the whole thing. And what I'm trying to say, yeah, we should put it out for consideration. Move them down to Dagwood and on the foreshore.
Yeah. I think the key thing is that it's got to be presented in a draft reserve management plan as it would be moved and made a far greater feature of in its new site. But then it frees up this valuable part of the land immediately adjacent to the centre of the par there. So we're not in any way confined to any future plans for what we want to do to develop that site.
Through the chair, just to further on that, I'm thinking, when we did our long-term plan consultation document, and we had those, we had a few key projects that we gave 2 options for that people could feedback on. I feel like it might be quite good with some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
Just to have the 2 options that people actually know what they're actually giving feedback on. And also, I've just been going through the links that Tracy has put into the chats. And so when that traffic flow report came through, the decision was made to add this work to the scope for the potential review of the reserve management plan and add it as a possibility for consultation.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So that was the decision that was made. So
Thank you.
we want to link that into the reserve management plan. Mark, any thoughts on that?
No, that sounds good. That's some good direction that we want to to include with with putting things in the draft. I think if we have like a draft reserve management plan, we can say this is the draft, but you can certainly have a consultation document going with that saying if other options might be. So we can look around how we present things. But yeah, that's what I'm really wanting at this stage, and we're quite early in the start of this. Is as we go and we're about to sort of get our pens out and start drafting, is we want to have some clear direction on which way things want to go. So that's really good. Gives us the direction, and also with the Rainbow Warrior masts, we can certainly put the direction in there that they would be moved and made a better feature of in a more appropriate place down by the waterfront where indeed the boats are and all the ship's masts used to be a common sight in Dagwood. In terms of that site where they currently occupy, what would you envisage seeing there in the future following there if they were to be removed?
Grass.
Pass by day, Karen.
Yeah. It needs to be softened. It's a solid, hard fixture sitting on a par that sort of has no place, and Matua Willie mentioned it earlier, and I totally support putting it in the document to relocate them to somewhere nearer the boating club, because that would be the most appropriate site for them.
So are you wanting to put in, so as a group, your thoughts are move the masts, you put that into a document and then you see what the feedback is? Or is it having 2 options, move them, keep them, maybe move them somewhere else on the site? How is the direction that you just want it moved? And that's what we can put on?
Darlene, if you're going to put it in the document just saying we're going to move them, then you're going to get all sorts of adverse reaction.
Yeah, that's right.
You're going to have to give a bit of, and this is the thing on any consultation. I've been very, very hot on this, and you've probably heard me sound off at other meetings. Our consultation documents often ask the community a question And I can tell you right now, when I read the question, I know the answer you're going to get. And it's not the answer that necessarily is what we hope for. Because you don't give enough of a framework around the question so that people get a full understanding of what they're giving feedback on. So on this particular one, we know it's going to be controversial from a number of quarters in the community. So we don't just say we're going to move the mast. Why are we moving the mast? We're moving the mast for two reasons. One, to put it in a better location, in a more appropriate location, down by the river frontage there, as Karen said, somewhere the boating club or somewhere down there, where you can make a feature of them so that they will become a bigger draw card for visitors to the township. And that frees the way on the site they currently are for the development that we're envisaging over the length of this reserve management plan of redeveloping that PAR site and creating that whole area adjacent to that as either part of it or in sympathy. In other words, we may say the actual site is not going to be developed for the actual PAR, but we want to have nice native trees or something else in there that is more consistent with the way we would envisage that PAR site being developed than having a couple of hard masts sticking out in the middle of it. So we need to frame the questions for this consultation document, or if we want feedback, frame it in a way that people know the full question, the full idea. Otherwise, we're going to get a whole lot of feedback that is going to be ill-informed and not really very much use.
Nice.
Totally agree, Peter.
Total for Peter. Sorry, people. I got from a lawnmowers.
Mark,
so we can that's good. That's clear for us, and we can look at how we can, again, as part of your consultation strategy. And I do like the idea of going out with a clear proposal to the community, saying this is the proposal, this is why, making it a clear and attractive proposal. And what I've had a big focus on over the years is trying to say to the community, if you like it, let us know that, because there will be people, well, what we tend to find is people tell us what they don't like, and then we only hear from the ones who don't like it. So we're trying to urge people to tell us what you do like. And certainly if people don't like it and we get enough well-reasoned negative feedback, we can change. That's the whole point of consulting, right? So I think that's good. So that's some good clear direction on that aspect. What else do we need to cover? So there was the whare tonga. Do we what are the views on that? Would you want to have that located on the actual PAR site, or maybe built in as part of the museum? Was there any clear views on that, or is that something that we need to workshop further?
What was the question again, Mark? Sorry, I just missed that.
So coming back to sort of the PAR site developments, there was the suggestion of having a whare tonga, having like maybe possibly built perhaps a sort of another wing to the museum, or maybe a separate standalone museum to house Maori artifacts, and to also highlight that as the I suppose the history of the PAR site and of Maori occupation in the area. Yeah,
the who we had with Mana Whenua, and I also take it back to Robbie Sarich era, a wish to have a taharoa at the entrance to the PAR site, and actually a whare tonga being on the PAR site itself. I'm just making that comment. How all this fits under the Antiquities Act or whatever archaeological sites is a different matter. I just see you, Rex. Mark, without huge detail, what's the sort of time frame leading up for the reserve management plan to be signed off by this present council? What are sort of the steps? Like, end of this year, it approaches really quickly, early part of next year, mid next year, and of course, when's the election, October or something like that next year? What's the sort of time? If you could just outline that for me, because I need to make a comment to Uriaho.
Yeah, so we've included an indicative timeline with the agenda. Yeah, and it's sort of towards the end of next calendar year, towards the end of 2022. And so the intention is to try and get through all of the key steps before the next election.
Through the chair, would you like me to share that document?
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
Yes,
Yes,
please.
thanks, Tracy.
Sorry, Mark, I'll just take that off you.
While you're going through that, I just wonder, we need to capture accessibility in our RMP to consider how wide and what users are able to adequately utilise the park. And yeah, you know, I'm talking about the gradient of the tracks, the surfaces, ramps, whatever that might be, to open up that site for our disability sector, for our disability community, because it's not, we're not there yet.
So through the chairs, you and Peter would be well aware, we are actually looking at doing an accessibility strategy for council. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We need to be considering that more and more across the council and across our parks. But yes, I think if you could capture it in there, Mark, we'll probably be able to link it through.
Yeah, there's a vision communicated there to the park would be accessible to everybody, and yeah, access around the park. That's really good. That's good.
Right. So Mark, we're on number 8 at this stage in the time frame. Give them full consideration and workshop the direction for in the reserve management plan. Is this the workshop? This period here, is this the workshop, or is it number 9?
Yep, that's correct.
Right. And this may require some additional, right.
Yeah, that's the intention, is to get some clear direction from you here. And like I say, we can sort of bounce some ideas around, on here some discussion, and this is all being recorded, which is convenient, makes it very easy for us to go back and take notes from, and start to put all this together. Yeah.
Sure. So my comment through you, Rex, and to you, Georgie, for and on behalf of Uria Ho, I think the 3 of us should have our own Zooey, so we can give some input into Mark and assist there. Probably 2 points. First point is focusing on the Poutotatangi pass site. 1 and 2 from a general point of view. This shouldn't take long, but at least we can give Mark some sort of steer on that we've got to input, and when we go back out into the public arena during that 2-month period, at least we've got something there for our people to consider.
Okay.
I just want to put that in front of you, Georgie, and Mata Rex.
Yeah, I'm happy for that to take place.
Yeah, exactly. I support that, Willie.
Okay. Now, Mark, therefore, from a logistical point of view, could you and Mata Rex, Uncle Rex, if you could sort of look at some sort of timing, and if Mark, I'm not too sure whether council could put a link together just for the 3 of us, so we've got a link to link in, and a doodle poll, so we can actually then highlight which suits us. It's a really busy time for all of us at the moment, including you guys out there. But this is something I'd like to actually get done before we break, before the end of this year. At least we've got something for you.
Yep, that's not a problem. We can do that. And in terms of capturing the direction and the reserve management plan, we can be very specific, but we don't have to be. We can also be quite high level, just as long as we get enough guidance in the reserve management plan, so that you know, when Te Reo Hau are saying they want to do this or they want to do that, that the reserve management plan supports what they want to do. You know, and likewise, when you want to go for funding, that you can say this project is in line with the reserve management plan, or better still, is envisaged by the reserve management plan. But we don't have to, you know, go right down to what colour you want to paint the fence and all that kind of thing.
No, exactly right. Okay. All right. So, Uncle Rex, is that fine with you?
Yeah, we could just find some dates that and have some options of dates. As to when we can Zoom.
All good. Okay.
Very good. Some of the other aspects we had, there was the suggestion of having a caretaker's residence on site for the Heritage Machinery Club. Now, that's something which, if it's going to happen, we would want to have that in the reserve management plan. So, looking for some guidance on that.
Yeah, just one thing. They mentioned that the museum currently already has a flat in it, I think. That was mentioned in one of the submissions. What does the museum use that for exactly?
Where is it?
It's out the back, up the top, behind the kitchen area. There's someone living in there. Someone's renting it.
What?
So someone who's not associated at all with the museum. So it's just being used as a revenue stream input into the museum funding, is it?
Yep.
So who manages that? The tenancy, is it the council, or is it a real estate, or what?
No, it's the Dagwood Museum Committee.
Yeah, that's obviously been set up some time ago. The question, of course, is do we want a proliferation of that sort of activity with other stakeholders? Because as this whole reserve becomes more developed and we have all these aspirations, if you start granting this right to other groups, then you're setting precedents, which makes it very hard to prevent others doing the same thing. I'm sort of pretty lukewarm on extending that provision for other stakeholders. This is a historic thing which we might have to live with at the moment, but to provide any more, I think, is a very dangerous precedent myself.
Yeah, you could end up with a block of motels.
Exactly.
Kia ora. Thank you for raising that, Peter, because I looked at that and just straight away went, no, that's not happening. Well, it shouldn't happen. But I wasn't aware that there was a flat and that someone was actually living in it. And how that came to be. Because I'm actually really uncomfortable with that. And where in their agreement, like, I'm interested to see where it says that they can sublet a flat at the back of their building. It's news to me. 5 years totally in and I've learned something very new.
Yeah. And it's totally different to if it was a caretaker employed by the museum to assist the security and et cetera, of their site there. That's a different situation. Just being let out to a third party, I'd like to get staff to look at the current leasing arrangements. I think they're under a lease rather than a license to occupy still, and just see what provisions are in there for them to have a third party tenancy on that flat.
I'm not too sure about the history of it, because the tenant or a tenant has been in there for some time, and it was also I think the person was there when the Lighthouse Function Centre was operating as a business.
Mm.
And I think it might have, I don't know, it might have developed from that. I could find out more anyway from Ross. And I think it was kind of like a caretaker arrangement, security type thing. But I don't know that that's still the same at this point in time. And I think it's just carried on.
Yeah. The thing is, Rex, though, is that we've got to always go back to the current lease or license to occupy for all these stakeholders of our parks and make sure that whatever they're doing does actually conform with what the conditions are within the particular document they're having to conform to. I know.
Sure, let me find out.
I know from experience in some of the other parks, you give them an inch, they take a mile. Some of these stakeholders, before you know what's happening, as Willie says, you'll have a block of motels built there.
Yep, let me find out.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a clear consensus. Yeah, I think that's a clear consensus that there's caretaker residences or residences are not supported. So that's good. Now, what was the others that we needed to talk about? In terms of direction, we should talk about the cycle tracks as well. So there was some suggestions there for expansion. You're happy with the suggestions there, or what's your thoughts on the expansion of the cycle tracks?
I'm
Well,
happy
just a
for that
question.
consultation.
Yeah, one of the questions, you know, the track that was put in there, which gave, which was funded a bit by PGF and also by, I think, one of our contestable reserve management fund grants. How's the maintenance of that track currently operating? Because the maintenance was meant to be part of the bike club's responsibilities. Are they maintaining it to a fit for purpose standard?
Darlene, are you aware of the situation there?
No, I'm not aware of the. I'll have to find out from the parks team.
That might be a mic question.
Because that is one of the conditions that they agreed to. Because any expansion, and certainly the bike club are very keen to expand tracks, but if I'm really saying, if they're doing a really good job of looking after the one that they're currently meant to be looking after, then I'd be comfortable with it being extended. But if they're not, then it's going to fall back on council to do more and more cost in terms of maintenance of that track, which is not necessarily something we want to have happen.
Very good. I wonder if it's useful if I share my screen again. We have a look at the area share. So there's a question as well with the Heritage Machinery Club. They've got a fence along here and some gates. And I want to talk a bit about some of the overflow parking requirements. So there were some of the suggestions were that the Lighthouse Function Centre, and I think it should also be noted the Heritage Machinery Club incorporated their club rooms as well. These are venues which are being used quite a bit by the community. And sometimes there is a requirement for overflow parking, particularly with funerals, weddings, and larger functions. So there's an area here, and particularly this area over here is being used for overflow parking. And there's a suggestion that should continue, and that there may be some need for improvements to the in terms of the vehicle access onto the grass there. Is that something which is supported generally? So I suppose it's a question of if we use, or what is your grass space, because this is all sort of sandstone, it's quite free draining as I understand it, generally reasonably free draining, and so there's the ability to use the grass for overflow parking. That so far it doesn't appear to be causing a lot of issues in terms of vehicle damage to the grass and whatnot, as opposed to using, like, for example, hard surfaced car parking.
Mark, I presume this overflow car parking is only required when they're having sort of a major club day or event of some sort where they're getting more than the normal sort of daily or weekly traffic through there. So it wouldn't really warrant any more than just improving the access way. Certainly if the land is not being damaged, well, we certainly wouldn't want to go ahead and for the expense of putting any compacted metal or sealing it at all. But have you any idea how many times that overflow car parking is required for that club there?
Question.
I
With
don't know
regard-
how often it's required. I understand it's quite frequent, and it's managed by the groups up there, and it seems to be.
Is that
Sorry, go ahead.
grassed area all part of their lease? Sorry, did you?
The
answer?
footprints. So you want to sort of the footprint areas. I have to go back on now. They've been moved to licensed to occupy, so I'd have to go back and look at what exactly the footprint is. By memory, I think the museum's one is quite extensive. It comes around right like that. And I think the Heritage Machinery Incorporated, I think also quite a large footprint as well. But there is a requirement within the license agreement. There's a requirement that they use all these open areas in common with other park users, and that's part of our standard template that we have across the district. That that you sort of we kind of get exclusive use of your building footprint, and the remainder of the area is to be used in common.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't have any actual comment on it at the moment, Mark.
To be fair, Mark, if it's within their license to occupy and it is able to be used by the museum for overflow parking, so they can have a shared facility, and it's not cutting up the ground, then if there's a need for a bit of a tidying up of the vehicle access, well, fair enough. But I don't see it needs to be changed very much. That's working satisfactorily because it's so far away. Both those operations, the museum and the machinery club, are both so far away from the road. You can't really expect people, if there's not sufficient parking available up there, you can't expect people to be hiking, large distances to go to any events up there. So I presume if it's working all right now, then it'll probably be satisfactory in the future.
Mark, did you capture Councillor Joyce Paki's comment in the chat around the Park Road access?
Sorry, I haven't been watching the chat.
Yeah.
So the Park Road access.
Yeah.
Sorry, Councillor, would you like to just reiterate that?
I'm aware that there is a lot of people who walk that track, and I would hate to see it closed, because there was a comment made earlier about what we'd like to see happen in that space as well. So, if at all, improvements, it's sort of through a bit of bush, it's an easy fix, but leave it there would be my request. They walk up there or down there when they do the loop.
So is there a consensus to improve and enhance this linkage through here? Is there?
Yep, I think that's probably fair enough. Do you want to extend that? The other parking area that's been mentioned is really a maintenance issue. I think this is the parking area for the bike park, which apparently has stormwater or rainwater runoff problems. But that's, I think, is just one of the many maintenance issues that people have raised, which need to be taken into account and by staff to include in normal maintenance issues.
Yes, and I've passed all of because obviously whenever we do a consultation, it seems we get a lot of maintenance requests and things which just fall into the general operations category, and we pass all that on. We're quite grateful for people providing that. We pass it on to the relevant staff. To get your direction, there's a fence over here which Heritage Machinery Incorporated have got, and it's got some gates in it that they use this to control access to this area for their crank-up days. Now they're asking to upgrade the fence. Their license to occupy agreement actually is to remove it. So we could go one way or the other on that. And so I look to this group for direction on if that fence is retained and if they're given permission to improve it, or if we remove that in accordance with their license to occupy.
Does it provide any real security? Because they do have them in the area just between the gates and the fence that they've got and the building itself. Quite a lot of storage in that area there. A storage of a lot of old machinery, etc. There. I presume to some extent the fence provides a bit of security for people just walking straight up there and getting amongst there and perhaps injuring themselves or whatever. Is there a reason they want to upgrade the fence?
And not so much in the terms of that. So this is sort of an outdoor display of heritage machinery that they've got there, and their way, I think, in which people are kept off that is more sort of portraying it as like a garden or a display, which is sort of uninviting to go trampling over. And the fence is more used to control access for, so they can charge access for their sort of annual crank-up day. So it's sort of more for controlling entry for and having like collecting fees for the crank-up day, rather than for rather than for controlling access to that area there. And in fact, public access is sort of encouraged. Indeed, all of the year is encouraged sort of through the park, rather than so it's just not so much for a safety aspect.
Yeah.
And so why was the reason in our license to occupy, Mark, the suggestion that that fence would be removed? Was there a reason behind that?
The thinking at the time was that it creates a feel, especially because it's got some multiple hazard area notices on it, creates a feel that this is a different area, or a different part of something. So you get a sort of feeling that you're not so welcome to just wander on through. There is a need potentially to have bollards or something in place to stop people driving and doing some inappropriate behaviour with vehicles on the grass. We understand that. We have quite a few bollards put in other places along the driveways, but in terms of the fence, it seems sort of gives a feel to pedestrians and park users that that's the area sort of off limits or unsafe, or they maybe feel discouraged to go through there. So that was the rationale for removing that.
Yeah, that sort of makes sense, Mark. It sort of makes sense. I'm not sort of too fussed about the blooming fence. What I'm worried about is a bloody ugly building every time you come up there. And I think it was about 5-6 years ago, we sort of asked about the possibility of actually having a mural on that side that's facing the road, and make it more sort of visually appealing.
Would you want to see a mural or plantings, or what would?
Well, certainly planting, but like I said, it's this erection of buildings that was in between the time when I stepped down from Poutotarangi and when I came back onto it, and how it got there, I don't understand it. All I'm just saying is, yeah, of course I'd like to see planting or something that actually, because all you've got at the moment is just a big wall, and it actually took away the views as one drove up the hill and around that part.
Can I ask also about views? So I'll pull back in for a moment. Management of vegetation beyond the border of the park is a bit of a difficult thing on private land, but in terms of the park itself and its fairly clear you want to maintain views and limit the amount of vegetation that gets in the way of the views. So that tends to be around the edge outside. More within the centre of the park, so there's more central areas. Is there a view towards shade trees or wanting to keep things open? What's the views there? Is there any views on that? I remember when I was a kid, going back a bit, there was large pine trees, similar to what there used to be at the Kairi Lakes back in the day. So we sort of had that. I've got a memory of what that used to be like. I don't know if there's any thoughts on that, or if it's preferable to leave it
well
open.
away from pine trees. All right, we don't want to put in pine trees. My feeling is that this is a park that we should have basically a native tree planting all the time. And I would go along with what Willie said, that along that building frontage where you drive down past it, we should have a nice variety of native plants that won't grow up huge. You know, you can select the appropriate species that will grow to sort of a maximum of, you know, I don't know, 8 to 10 meters or something. So they're not going to, you know, become a nuisance, but they would provide a nice barrier to soften what is a very harsh visual look as you drive into the park. I think that's the way we ought to go. And as far as shade trees, you just select native trees that will do both enhance the visual appearance of the park as well as create shade where necessary. I certainly wouldn't put exotics in there, and I'd steer well clear of pines. We know what pines ultimately have a terminal life of about 30 to 50 years, depending on the growing conditions. And at that stage, pine trees tend to fall over. So that's coming from someone who had 25 years in the forestry industry.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Is that something that can be actually mentioned inside the reserve management plan, Mark? In other words, no exotics, and the plants that go into the reserve itself are eco-sourced seeds from its local area and replanted. Something like that. Is that sort of stuff that can go into the plan?
Yeah, just to clarify on that. So all future plantings are to be eco-sourced natives. Now existing exotics, maybe that's probably, I think you probably want to be keeping what's there, would I be right? The larger trees as you come in there. It's maybe something that's, probably
I'm not suggesting those exotics that exist there. Certainly, I'm not recommending that we take them out, but when they do deteriorate in time to come, then we replace them with natives.
Yep, it's nice and clear. All future plantings to be native.
That's right. Or alternatively, it may, even if we want to be a bit more futuristic looking, we may actually, in some of those areas where there are current exotics that are well established, that we underplant them with natives so that the natives grow, and when they're sufficiently big, well, then it's probably the time when those exotics can be removed. So you could actually gradually transition the whole park into natives.
Yeah. What that does, that sort of thinking, is it really aligns with the remediation for the Kaipara. The remediation is quite clear now. There's no other plants. The Kaipara Moana remediation will not plant any other plants except natives, right throughout the whole catchment, and those plants are eco-sourced from their eco districts and replanted in there. So it fits in a bigger picture as well.
Yep, very good. The suggestion of having a cafe within the park. So you remember the Lighthouse Function Centre used to operate something, but possibly allowing a cafe within the park, or the alternative, I suppose, to that is allowing food trucks to operate.
I personally would be opposed to a permanent commercial cafe. I think under the provisions of their license to occupy or leases, if they have an event, and an event part of their consenting for that could be that they would have food trucks to provide food and refreshments. But setting up a cafe, I think is going to pose a whole lot of downstream issues, which we could probably sit here and debate for quite a long time. And I'm also, from a commercial point of view, I'm not sure that you'd get enough patronage to make it commercially, any real advantage to someone to set one up. So, yeah. Does the museum provide sort of tea and coffee for people who come in to visit it?
I don't believe they do. Okay. Now, Fiona, are there any other points we need to cover off? Just looking at the list you sent through.
The only other thing I had
I
was
wonder
some
if,
potential headings for management aspirations, but I don't know if we need to go through those now. I think the feedback that we've got can feed under those management aspirations, and we can have that when we meet next, potentially. Was that your thoughts as well, Mark?
Yeah, I think with that respect, and I wonder if we want to look at the vision statement, or I mean, maybe perhaps not so much a vision statement, but a vision for the park. Do we want to look at that? Are we happy with the existing? I wonder if I can find the existing one here.
Through the chair, can I just check? Through the chair, it's Tracy here, just checking you're at 4 o'clock, which is the end of your meeting, but you're welcome to continue, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I'm happy we continue. Yeah. We're almost finished.
Zoom in, please.
Well, that actually is incorporating a lot of what we've talked about this afternoon about the future direction of development of the power site and a whole lot of these other areas. And, it's nothing we've said is in contradiction to that current vision statement.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
Very good.
I'd be interested to see that translated into Te Reo Māori. Kia ora.
Yeah, good idea. Good idea, Karen.
Yeah, good comment.
Yep, and yeah, we'll make sure that Te Reo Māori is used throughout the draft documents as well. Certainly in terms of the headings and yes, the vision statement. So for the vision statement, we might revisit this a little bit as we draft, but we'll keep it things certainly in line with that then, if that's the consensus, and we'll bring you a draft reserve management plan with draft vision, and look to you for guidance on that as we continue to develop the draft.
Just a comment through the chair, with regards to, we talked about plantings up there being native. I'd also ask that we look at eco-source native, and we reconsider our use of those pesticides up there, the sprays. I know I received a whole lot of comment around the use of spray up there on the PAR site that knocked back. Yeah, I look at that photo and I'm a little bit horrified by it, if I'm honest. I just wonder if we can start looking at, more naturally sourced
Sort of organics.
Yes, something to remembering it as it is a PAR site. It's used by a lot of people. If we can get away from any sort of toxic sprays, that'd be great.
Mm.
Good point.
Totally agree.
Good point.
Very good. And thinking back to those suggestions received, was there anything else that clearly stood out?
We've covered most of them.
Covered most of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think if you're happy for us as staff as we develop the draft to keep referring back to those suggestions, we'll certainly do that, and look to incorporate those which are in alignment with the direction you've given us here today.
Yeah, cool.
Hmm.
Through you, Uncle Richard, Chair, and Mark, and I apologise. I turned my camera off because my phone's been going hot. We've got people out there watching this, and they, and one to you, Mark, specifically, and you, Uncle Rex, Fiona, Richard would like to be involved with our Uriaho sort of Zooey.
Happy to do that.
Very good.
Very good. So I think, does that conclude our workshop for today?
I think so. Yep. Very good, Mark. Thank you very much for that.
Very good. And do we pass that resolution that goes with the report?
Hmm.
And I think that's the only thing remaining there. I'll share my screen. Very good.
So,
Okay,
Mr.
thank you,
Chair,
Mark.
you have
Yeah.
Councillor Joyce Paki moving and Councillor Wethy seconding A of the report.
Yeah.
Perhaps we just check whether they're happy now to continue with B and add that to the original resolution so that it's all one, and then we
Okay,
can
so
move and vote on that. If you are happy, Councillor Joyce Paki.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Thank you.
And seconder, Councillor Wethy.
Yes, yes. Happy with that. Thanks, Tracy.
Wonderful. And we just have another vote, Mr. Chair. That would be great.
Yep.
okay,
Full
we'll put
resolution now.
that resolution. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. That's carried.
Thank
So
you.
we'll come to thank you all for your attendance and participation and ideas in this reserve management plan and for the suggestions that have come up from the community and public. So thank you for your time. So I will close with karakia. Kei noi tātou, let us pray. Te atua tēnei mātou pononga nei te whakawheta kia koe, maumanakitanga kia mātou mai i timatanga o tēnei hui, kaino ki tēnei haura. Mai hiwa ko te manaki, mana ko te e tiaki. Mai ho te māramatanga o na kanui ki runga kia koutou, mana anō i tuku iho te rangi marie ki koutou ai nei, a ke tonu atu. Amen e.
Amen.
Amen.
Kia ora
Amen.
koutou.
Thank you very much.